I'm 94 years old. I have lived for nearly a century without ever saying three simple words that could have changed everything for the people I loved most in this world. Three words that stayed locked in my heart, while the people who needed to hear them lived their entire lives wondering if I cared, if they mattered, if they were worthy of love. My name is Edward, and I need to tell you something that took me 94 years to understand. Love that is never expressed is not love at all. It's a secret that dies with you. The people in your life cannot read your mind, cannot see into your heart, cannot know what you feel unless you tell them. I spent 9 decades feeling deep love for my family while acting like a man incapable of emotion, and my silence created a legacy of people who never felt truly loved. You think that love is automatic? That the people who matter to you just know how you feel without being told? You think that providing for someone, protecting them, working hard for them is the same as loving them. You think that saying "I love you" is unnecessary, embarrassing, something only weak people need to do. That's what I thought for 94 years. That's the lie that cost me the chance to give my family the emotional security they needed, that robbed them of the warmth that makes life worth living. I learned emotional distance from my father. He was a good man, a hard worker, a provider who never missed a day of work in 37 years. But he was also a man who had been taught that emotions were weakness, that real men didn't express feelings. In my entire childhood, I never heard my father say "I love you" to me, to my mother, or to my siblings. Not once. When I cried as a child, he told me to stop acting like a girl. When I was afraid, he told me to be brave like a man. When I tried to hug him, he would pull away, uncomfortable with physical affection. He taught me that men who showed emotion were weak, that fathers who were affectionate were somehow failing to prepare their sons for the harsh realities of the world. The first hard truth I learned too late. Children learn how to love by watching their parents love. When you withhold affection from your children, you don't teach them to be strong, you teach them to be emotionally distant. When you never say "I love you," you teach them that love is something that should be assumed, not expressed. And they carry that lesson into every relationship they have for the rest of their lives. I married Dorothy in 1952. She was warm, affectionate, emotionally expressive, everything I had been taught not to be. During our courtship, she would tell me she loved me, and I would respond with "me too," or "same here," or simply change the subject. I felt the words in my heart, but they would not come out of my mouth. They felt foreign, embarrassing, like admitting weakness or vulnerability. Dorothy tried for 43 years to create a marriage where we could express our feelings openly, where love was something we said to each other regularly, where physical affection was natural and comfortable. But I could not adapt to her emotional warmth. When she told me she loved me, I would nod or grunt or act like I hadn't heard her. When she tried to hold my hand, I would find excuses to use my hands for something else. When she wanted to cuddle while watching television, I would suggest separate chairs were more comfortable. I convinced myself that my love for Dorothy was obvious, that she could see it in the way I worked to provide for our family, in the way I kept our house in good repair, in the way I never forgot her birthday or our anniversary. I thought that showing love through actions was more meaningful than saying it with words, that a man's devotion should be measured by his reliability, not his verbal expressions of affection. But Dorothy needed to hear the words. She needed the physical affection. She needed emotional intimacy, not just practical partnership. And because I could not give her those things, she lived for 43 years married to a man who loved her deeply but acted like someone incapable of love. The second hard truth: love that is not expressed becomes invisible to the people who need it most. When you never say "I love you," people begin to doubt whether you do. When you avoid physical affection, people begin to feel unwanted. When you treat emotional intimacy like weakness, you create relationships that feel safe to you but empty to everyone else. We had 4 children. Robert was born in 1953, Margaret in 1955, Susan in 1957, and Thomas in 1959. I loved those children more than life itself, but I could not tell them so. I could not hug them without feeling awkward and uncomfortable. I could not express the pride, joy, and overwhelming love I felt for them because expressing emotion had been trained out of me since childhood. When Robert scored his first goal in soccer, I felt like my heart would burst with pride, but all I said was, "Good job." When Margaret won the spelling bee, I wanted to pick her up and tell her how proud I was, but instead I nodded and said it was nice. When Susan played piano at her school recital, I was moved to tears, but I sat stone-faced and told her afterward that she had done well. My children learned to seek emotional warmth from their mother because their father was incapable of providing it. They learned that Dad was the person who handled practical matters but not the person you went to when you needed comfort, encouragement, or expressions of love. They learned that fathers were providers and disciplinarians, not sources of affection and emotional support. The third hard truth: children need emotional warmth from both parents, not just one. When fathers withhold affection, children grow up feeling like half of their family is emotionally unavailable. When you cannot express love to your children, you teach them that love is conditional, rare, something that must be earned rather than something that is freely given. As my children grew older, the distance between us became more pronounced and more painful. During their teenage years, when they needed emotional support to navigate the challenges of adolescence, they turned to their mother because they had learned that their father was not someone who dealt with feelings. When they fell in love, got their hearts broken, struggled with self-doubt, or celebrated achievements, they shared these experiences with Dorothy, not with me. I wanted to be close to my children, but I didn't know how to bridge the emotional distance I had created. I wanted to tell them I loved them, but the words felt impossible to say. I had trained myself for so many decades to suppress emotional expression that I had lost the ability to access those feelings in a way that I could share with others. When Robert graduated from high school, I felt overwhelming pride and love. But when he looked to me for emotional connection during this milestone moment, I shook his hand and told him he had worked hard. When Margaret got engaged, I felt joy and worry and love, but I expressed those feelings by asking practical questions about her fiancé's job and financial stability. When Susan had her first baby, I felt love so intense it physically hurt, but I held my grandchild awkwardly and commented on how much babies cost to raise. My children learned to stop looking to me for emotional responses because they had learned that I didn't provide them. They learned to love me despite my emotional unavailability, but they also learned not to expect warmth, affection, or verbal expressions of love from their father. The fourth hard truth: when you cannot express love to your children, you miss the most important part of being a parent. Providing food, shelter, and education is important, but children need emotional nourishment just as much as physical nourishment. When you withhold affection, you starve them emotionally even while meeting all their practical needs. Dorothy died in 1995 after 43 years of marriage. During her final weeks in the hospital, she was weak and scared and needed emotional comfort. I sat by her bedside for hours, holding her hand, feeling love and grief so intense that I thought it might kill me. But I could not tell her I loved her. The night before Dorothy died, she looked at me and said, "Edward, I know you love me. I've always known. But I wish you could have told me." And still, even knowing that she was dying, even knowing that this was my last chance, I could not say, "I love you." She died the next morning having never heard those words from the man who had loved her for over 4 decades. The fifth hard truth: death does not wait for you to overcome your emotional limitations. When someone is dying, they need to hear that they are loved, not just believe that they are loved. The people who matter to you will not live forever, and if you wait too long to express your love, you will spend the rest of your life knowing that they died without hearing the words they needed to hear. After Dorothy's death, I was alone with my grief and my regret. I realized that I had wasted 43 years of marriage by refusing to express the love I felt. I had deprived my wife of the emotional intimacy she needed, not because I didn't love her, but because I was too emotionally damaged to tell her so. I had created a marriage where love existed but was never acknowledged, where deep affection was present but never expressed. My children tried to comfort me during my grieving process, but even in my grief, I could not be emotionally vulnerable with them. When they asked how I was doing, I said I was fine. When they offered to spend time with me, I told them I didn't need anything. When they tried to share memories of their mother, I changed the subject. I was grieving the loss of the most important person in my life, but I grieved alone because I could not share my emotional pain with anyone. Robert, Margaret, Susan, and Thomas had learned from me that men don't express feelings, that grief should be handled privately, that needing emotional support was a sign of weakness. So even though they wanted to help me, they didn't know how to offer comfort to a father who had never modeled emotional vulnerability, and I didn't know how to accept comfort from children I had never taught to express or receive affection. The sixth hard truth: when you never model emotional vulnerability, the people who love you don't know how to comfort you when you need it most. When you teach people that feelings should not be expressed, they cannot provide emotional support during times of crisis. When you withhold affection throughout your life, people don't know how to give you affection when you need it desperately. As my children became adults and started families of their own, I watched them repeat many of the same emotional patterns I had established. Robert was a good father but struggled to express affection to his children. Margaret was loving but had difficulty with physical intimacy in her marriage. Susan was caring but found it hard to say "I love you" to her husband and children. Thomas was devoted to his family but showed love through actions rather than words. They had all learned from me that love was something you felt but didn't express, that affection was uncomfortable, that emotional intimacy was unnecessary as long as practical needs were being met. I had passed down my emotional limitations to another generation, creating a family legacy of people who loved deeply but could not express that love in ways that made others feel loved. When my grandchildren were born, I felt love so overwhelming that it physically hurt. But I could not express this love in ways they could understand and appreciate. I was an awkward grandfather who provided practical gifts but could not provide emotional warmth. I attended their events but could not celebrate their achievements with the enthusiasm they needed. I cared about them desperately but appeared to be indifferent to their emotional needs. The seventh hard truth: emotional patterns are passed down through generations. When you cannot express love to your children, they struggle to express love to their children. When you withhold affection, you create a family legacy of emotional distance that affects not just your relationships, but your children's relationships and your grandchildren's relationships. At 85 years old, I finally tried to change. I tried to tell my adult children that I loved them, but the words felt foreign and uncomfortable after decades of emotional suppression. I tried to hug them, but physical affection felt awkward and forced. I tried to be emotionally supportive, but I didn't know how to comfort people because I had never learned to comfort or be comforted. My attempts at emotional expression felt artificial to my children because they were so different from the father they had known for their entire lives. They appreciated my efforts, but they could not easily accept affection from someone who had withheld it for so many decades. They had learned to protect themselves from disappointment by not expecting emotional warmth from their father, and learning to accept it required unlearning 40 years of emotional self-protection. The eighth hard truth: learning to express love late in life is possible, but difficult for everyone involved. When you have withheld affection for decades, suddenly becoming affectionate feels awkward and unnatural. When you have taught people not to expect emotional warmth from you, they struggle to accept it when you finally try to provide it. I see other elderly men who have warm, affectionate relationships with their adult children and grandchildren. These men hug their families, tell them they love them, express pride and joy and emotional connection without embarrassment or discomfort. They have something I never learned: the ability to be emotionally vulnerable, to express love freely, to show affection without feeling weak or uncomfortable. My neighbor Bill is 90 years old and has a house full of children and grandchildren who visit him regularly. I watch them hug him when they arrive, tell him they love him when they leave, sit close to him when they watch television together. He tells them he's proud of them, that he loves them, that they make him happy. He is emotionally available in ways that I never learned to be, and as a result, he has relationships that are warm and close and emotionally satisfying. The difference between Bill and me is not that he has a better family or that his children are more loving. The difference is that Bill learned to express his love, to show affection, to be emotionally vulnerable with the people who matter to him. He created a family culture where feelings are expressed, where love is said out loud, where physical affection is natural and comfortable. I'm 94 years old now. I have maybe 2 years left, maybe less. And I am spending these final years surrounded by people who love me but have never heard me say that I love them back. My children care about me, but our relationships are careful and distant because I never taught them to expect emotional intimacy from their father. My grandchildren are kind to me, but they see me as a formal, distant figure because I never learned to be an affectionate grandfather. I think about all the moments when I could have said, "I love you," and chose silence instead. All the times when I could have hugged my children and chose to keep my distance. All the opportunities I had to express pride, joy, and affection, and chose to withhold those expressions because I thought they were unnecessary. I think about Dorothy, lying in that hospital bed telling me that she knew I loved her but wished I could have said it. I think about how different our marriage could have been if I had been able to tell her daily that I loved her, if I had been able to show affection. 3 words. I love you. 3 simple words that could have changed everything for the people who needed to hear them most. 3 words that I felt in my heart every single day but could never bring myself to say out loud. 3 words that would have cost me nothing to say but would have given the people I loved everything they needed to feel secure, valued, and emotionally nourished. Don't make my mistake. Don't withhold love from the people who need it most. Don't let fear of vulnerability prevent you from expressing the most important feelings you have. Don't wait until someone is dying to wish you had told them you loved them. Tell the people in your life that you love them. Say it out loud. Say it often. Say it without embarrassment or discomfort. Hug them, hold them, show physical affection even if it feels awkward at first. Create emotional intimacy, not just practical partnerships. Make sure the people who matter to you know that they matter, that they are loved, that they bring joy to your life. Your children need to hear that you love them, not just believe that you do. Your spouse needs emotional warmth, not just practical support. Your family needs affection, not just provision. The people who love you cannot read your mind, and they will not live forever. If you wait too long to express your love, you will spend the rest of your life knowing that they died without hearing the words they needed to hear. I'm tired now. Tired of carrying 94 years of unexpressed love, of relationships that could have been warm but remained distant because I was too afraid of vulnerability to say 3 simple words. Don't let the people you love die wondering if they were truly loved. Tell them, show them, let them know. The words matter more than you think they do, more than I realized.